American crews examined broken-down elephants, confirming intelligence reports. Extraordinary armor and firepower, but crippling vulnerabilities. Limited vision, a single forward machine gun, and underpowered drivetrain meant the vehicle could not be relied upon in offensive operations. American tactics emphasized flanking, waiting for breakdowns, and artillery support, and even 75mm guns could kill from the sides. Few elephants survived in Italy, and most losses were mechanical. Surviving Ferdinands on the Eastern Front served defensively, often in ambush with infantry support. But attrition and breakdowns steadily reduced numbers. By war's end, only 2 remained intact. One captured at Kursk, now at Kubinka Khan Museum, and one in Italy, at Fort Gregg Adams. Ferdinand's design flaw was clear. Over-specialization and assumptions about perfect tactical support made a seemingly unstoppable machine vulnerable in reality. For American designers, it was a powerful lesson. Armor and firepower alone do not guarantee battlefield effectiveness.
4 American battleships were sunk outright. The Arizona had exploded with such force that debris rained across Ford Island, a quarter-mile away. The Oklahoma had rolled completely to port, 150 degrees, trapping more than 400 men. West Virginia and California rested on the harbor floor, superstructures still visible, hulls shattered by torpedoes. 4 other battleships were damaged beyond immediate repair. The Nevada had tried to escape, but was grounded to prevent sinking in the channel. The Pennsylvania sat in dry dock, damaged, but salvageable. Maryland and Tennessee were trapped behind capsized vessels, their decks torn by bombs. In total, 18 ships destroyed or crippled. 2,403 Americans dead. Gasps. Hundreds more wounded. Japan had lost only 29 aircraft, a loss of 353 launched. 9 Zero fighters, 5 torpedo bombers, 15 dive bombers. Losses under 8%. Exhales sharply. By any measure, a staggering victory. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, who led the airstrike, landed on Akagi and reported to Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo. The mission had been a complete success. The American Pacific Fleet was crippled. The path for Japanese expansion in Southeast Asia was wide open. Pilots were jubilant, exhausted, shouting over one another about what they had done, what they had seen. But Jender stood apart. He was 37, one of the most brilliant aviation tacticians in the Imperial Japanese Navy. Since January 1941, he had worked under Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, designing every aspect of this operation: training, formations, target priorities, bomb loads. But the numbers in his head told a different story. A story of oil barrels, industrial capacity, and calculations fatally flawed from the start. Japan had won a tactical triumph, while ensuring strategic defeat. The problem was not the battleships. Everyone focused on the burning, sinking fortresses in the harbor. But Jender knew battleships were becoming obsolete. Naval future belonged to carriers and submarines, not slow-moving gun platforms that could be destroyed from the sky. The fatal problem lay in what hadn't been attacked. 4.5 million barrels of fuel oil sat in above-ground storage tanks on the eastern side of Pearl Harbor. 49 massive cylindrical tanks spread across 3 separate facilities, built over decades as the Navy expanded its Hawaiian operations. The Lower Tank Farm, constructed 1913 to 1923, held roughly 1.4 million barrels across 22 tanks. The original 5 tanks, built in 1913, held 35,000 to 50,000 barrels each. 17 more were added in 1923, each with 50,000 barrel capacity. The middle tank farm contained about 500,000 barrels in 10 tanks. The upper farm, largest of all, held roughly 2.5 million barrels in 17 tanks, each 150,000 barrels. Together, these tanks supplied the entire Pacific Fleet. Admiral Chester Nimitz would later note 4.5 million barrels, all vulnerable to small arms fire, let alone bombs. The tanks were built for peace, not war. Above ground, clustered for efficiency, visible from the air, optimized for operations, not survival. Reconnaissance had spotted them. Tako Yoshikawa, under the alias Tadashi Morimura, from the Japanese consulate in Honolulu, had spent months observing Pearl Harbor, counting ships, noting aircraft, cataloging dry docks, relaying coded messages weekly. The tanks were vulnerable. Thin steel walls, designed only to hold fuel under atmospheric pressure. A 500-pound bomb would rupture a tank. The fuel would spill and ignite. Fuel oil does not explode like gasoline, but it burns, intensely and relentlessly. One burning tank could rupture its neighbors without direct hits. A single breach could doom the entire complex. All 4.5 million barrels would be destroyed. The Pacific Fleet carried roughly 760,000 barrels, in oilers and bunkers combined, less than a sixth of what Pearl Harbor stored. In the 9 days after the attack, the fleet burned 750,000 barrels, searching for Japanese carriers. Nearly the entire seaborne fuel supply gone in a week. Without the shore tanks, the Pacific Fleet would have been immobilized. Pearl Harbor would have to be abandoned. Ships would retreat to San Diego, San Francisco, or Seattle, 2,000 miles away. Operational range would be cut in half. American interference in the Philippines, Malaya, or the Dutch East Indies would have been impossible for 12 to 18 months, maybe longer. Rebuilding 4.5 million barrels of fuel storage is not quick. Each tank required construction, engineering, testing, plus pipelines, pumps, loading stations, fire suppression systems, a complete logistics chain built from scratch under wartime conditions. But the Japanese never attacked the oil tanks. No bombs were dropped. The plan prioritized battleships, the dramatic targets, but not the carriers, submarines, repair facilities, or fuel tanks. This was not accident. It was a fundamental miscalculation of modern naval warfare. Captain Kameto Kurushima, senior staff officer to Admiral Yamamoto, was a brilliant strategist. He had a reputation for working naked, claiming clothes distracted him. He ate mostly rice and could recite the fuel capacity of every major warship in both fleets. In early 1941, Japan faced a critical question. Could it sustain war against the U.S.? Japan imported 90% of its oil. Peacetime consumption, 32 to 37 million barrels annually. American embargoes in July 1941, followed by Britain and the Dutch, cut off over 80% of imports. By September, Japan held 50 million barrels in strategic reserves. The Navy alone consumed 2,900 barrels per hour, 69,600 barrels daily, 25.4 million annually. Including the Army and civilians, the reserves would be exhausted by 1943. Japan had two choices: surrender or seize Dutch East Indies oil fields. They chose war. Three assumptions guided their calculations. 1. The war would be short. Americans would negotiate after 6 to 8 months. 2. Naval operations would follow the decisive battle doctrine. Most ships at anchor, minimal fuel use. 3. Capturing Dutch East Indies oil would permanently solve supply needs. All assumptions were catastrophically wrong. The war lasted 3 years and 8 months. American industry mobilized for total war. Naval operations became continuous across vast distances, carrier raids, submarine patrols, amphibious assaults, supply convoy escorts, fuel consumption soared. Destroyers at 15 knots, 100 tons daily. High-speed operations, 300 to 400 tons. Cruising speed assumptions failed entirely. By mid-1942, Japan's fleet burned far more than planned. Fiscal 1942, 41.79 million barrels. Fiscal 1943, 43.99 million. Fuel assumptions had failed. Capturing Dutch East Indies oil did not solve the problem. Allied defenders had sabotaged infrastructure, blown up tanks, dynamited pumping stations, set fires, damaged pipelines. Japanese engineers lacked the numbers and expertise to restore production efficiently. Equipment was specialized, heavy, and impossible to improvise. The strategic miscalculations that began months before December 7th would doom Japan before the war's end.